All right, how's everybody doing out there? In this episode of Dirt Cheap Guitar, we're going to be taking a closer look at the Epiphone Special 1 with the P90s. Now, in the clip at the beginning, I played a lot of different parts in that little snippet of tune, basically to show the different sounds that you can get out of this guitar. And I'm going to go through and kind of illustrate some of those tones here. But first, let me talk a little bit about this particular guitar. If you haven't seen the unboxing video for this, click the link above and you'll be able to take a look at this with my first impressions as I take it out of the box. I shot that a couple of weeks ago because I wanted to kind of play around with this a little bit before I did a video on it, so I had a pretty good idea about this guitar and whether or not it's a good buy for you. Now, I got this one from one of the big box music stores who will remain nameless, but they were pretty good about finding it for me, and I believe the price shipped and everything was right around $160. Now, what's different about this one, so the Epiphone, of course, is kind of licensed by Gibson, or it's under the Gibson umbrella. This one was made in China. It's got a mahogany body, and it has what they call an aged TV yellow finish. I talked about in the last video why they call it TV yellow, or one of the many theories as to why it's called TV yellow. Nobody knows 100% for sure. But some differences that you'll notice between this and like the Les Paul Epiphone that I did in a previous video, or other types of guitars like that. First of all, this one is fully a solid body. It's not like the Les Pauls and some of the others where it may be chambered, or it's a top and a bottom that's kind of put together. Secondly, this one does not have a separate bridge and tailpiece. It's all one part here. And when I first got it, I was like, well, how can you do the intonation on that? But actually, the intonation is pretty good. And what the intonation is, for those of you that don't know, is we adjust basically where the bridge is kind of setting to make sure that the length of the string from the bridge to the nut is the same as the distance where the frets line up. So basically, in a nutshell, at the 12th fret, you should have the same pitch, whether you're fretting or doing a harmonic. That means the halfway points kind of line up. But if you take a close look at this bridge, and I'll be doing this until I can get a second camera synced up, you'll see that it has a couple of screws here that adjust where this stop piece sits relative to the little pins here. It also has some raised edges on here, so it's somewhat intonated to start with. There are aftermarket manufacturers that make these where there's some adjustable pieces in here, but this one actually turned out pretty good. The second difference is this has P90 pickups, and how these are different from humbuckers is humbuckers actually have kind of two coils of magnets in here. These only have one, similar to the Fender style pickups. The difference is the way these are constructed. I believe that the bars themselves are actually shorter. It gives a different sound. It's not exactly like what you get out of a Stratocaster or a Telecaster. It's a little bit thicker, more beefy. These in particular are called Soapbar because the screws that actually mount it are mixed in the pole pieces. So you'll see a couple of screws there. That's actually how it's attached to the guitar. There's a different type that's called, some people call it a dog-eared, and it has little pieces that are attached where you screw down on the sides. Now, as far as the sound, right now I've got it running into my Marshall, and I'm going to set it for a clean tone, somewhat clean tone, to give you an idea of what it really sounds like. And of course that's the neck pickup, and then the bridge, or excuse me, that's the bridge pickup, and then the next neck pickup. So it does sound a little bit different than a Strat tone. Now I've been playing this for a couple of weeks now. I haven't even taken off the tag. It's got that little mini pearl thing going, I guess. And a few things. It was set up pretty well. I'm guessing that this was a floor or demo model because, like I said in the last video, it's kind of hard to get these. They're very popular in this color. So when I first got it, the setup on it was pretty good. The intonation was good. The frets had a little bit of oxidation on them. Essentially, when it's not played and it sets up, you may get a little oxidation on the frets, and what happens is when you try to bend a note, it'll feel, some people describe it as crunchy or like there's some grit on the frets. That came off simply with playing. I thought I might have to hit it with a little bit of steel wool just to clean it up, but just playing took care of that. So one of the other limitations on inexpensive guitars is in the tuning machines. This is a place where the manufacturers will use a lower quality to basically save money on production. And I'm going to use the D string here to illustrate, but as I turn the D string, you'll see there's a little bit of play in there where the pitch really doesn't change. Most of the higher quality tuning machines, as soon as you start to move it, you will hear a change in pitch, unless it's stuck in the, hung up in the nut or something. So when I turn it and it's detuned, the workaround for this is to keep it under tension. So I always come from below the note and tune up to it. You don't want to go above and then tune down, because then you're in that slack region where there's a little bit of play in the note or in the machine. So what I do is I tune up, and then I'm kind of tuned, but I'm at the top of that play range there. If I tune down, I don't have as much control as when I'm tuning from below the note. And that's kind of a good practice anyway, even if you have high quality tuning machines. Because it keeps proper tension on here. If it's slightly loose, you know, it may go out of tune when bending. This has not, has actually stayed in tune really well. And as you saw in the video, I did quite a few bends and really put some tension on the guitar, and it stayed in tune the whole time. The fretboard is actually finished fairly well. It doesn't really have any kind of rough edges on it. Like I've said before, when you get a lower priced guitar, sometimes they don't have the quality assurance once it comes out of the factory. Maybe you'll get some kind of rough edges. This one's actually finished pretty well, and I really haven't had to do anything to it. I haven't even pulled the plastic off of the pickups yet. And I've actually been kind of satisfied with it. This is something that, you know, I might actually carry out to a gig. Now, some pros to this. It is very lightweight. So if you're playing a gig somewhere and, you know, you've got to play 3 hours or something, by the end of the night, when your back starts hurting, this is kind of a lifesaver. So it's very lightweight. It plays pretty well. The sound quality is pretty good as well. The cons with it, well, the biggest con is that single coil pickups will pick up noise, and you might hear a little bit of hum coming through the amplifier right now. If I were to turn on some distortion or other types of effects, it would be more prominent. This is also true for the Fender style Stratocaster and Telecaster pickups. There are manufacturers that make aftermarket pickups that are supposed to be quieter or silent, but in reality, if you just turn it down when you're not playing, you're not as bothered by the hum, so to speak. So there's one volume control for both pickups and one tone control. This is different from the Les Paul that has a separate volume and tone for each pickup. And why does that matter? Well, when you have the guitar in the center position and you're using both pickups, you can actually vary the tone a little bit by adjusting each of the volumes on the Les Paul. Also, you can turn one completely off and kind of get that stutter effect where you're switching from the pickup that's active to the one that's turned off. So, who is this guitar for? Well, for beginners, this is a really good guitar for the price. If you started on acoustic and you want to get into electric, you don't want to go out and spend a ton of money, because it's easy to spend $1,000, $2,000, even $3,000 on a high quality instrument. This is not a $3,000 guitar, so you can't compare this to the higher quality hand-built models. It's just not the same. However, it's pretty good. So I would even say this is probably as good as some guitars that maybe cost 2 or 3 times as much. Again, it's all about expectations and what you plan to do with it. Don't buy one of these and think that it's going to be comparable to a $2,000 Les Paul, or I think the Les Paul Juniors and Specials that are made by Gibson go somewhere between $700 and $1,000. It's not exactly the same. But you could get one of these and then maybe down the road upgrade the tuners or change out the pickups, and you have a pretty good guitar. You can also get a different type of bridge. It's a little bit more adjustable. So for beginners, it's pretty good. It's also good as a second guitar if you're thinking about putting a band together, and I'll cover more of this in my upcoming series that's not announced yet. But I'll talk about things to prepare yourself to be able to go out and do gigs. And one thing is you need a second guitar. Basically, if you're playing on stage and break a string or anything like that, you want to have a backup. You never know when something might go wrong with your main instrument. So it's a good second guitar. It's also good if you want to get into doing some slide guitar or experiment with different tunings, because I've done a little bit of slide with this. I might raise the action a little bit if I were going to use it specifically for slide, but as it sits right now, it's okay for slide. One thing about slide and alternate tunings is it's nice to have a guitar that's kind of set up for that, so you're not having to change tunings to go to a different key. That's also true if you are playing live. This could be a third guitar. If you're thinking about doing some slide work live, if you have a guitar that's ready to go, that's in tuning, like if you're using open E, like Allman Brothers sometimes do, or some of the other different open tunings, it's nice to have a guitar that's already set. When you look at professional musicians and bigger name artists, and they go out and they carry like 10 different guitars with them, usually it's because the guitars may be tuned differently. They may have different pickup configurations. One might be in a drop D tuning. One might be set up for slide. And that's kind of why they'll usually carry multiple guitars. Each of them does something different, or maybe a backup for one of those guitars that does something different. So that is the Epiphone. So let's look at a few playing examples here. So I've kind of done the clean sound. This is going through my Marshall, through my pedal board, which nothing is turned on the pedal board, and into the Marshall. Let's try it with a little bit of gain. So a little bit of distortion. That's both pickups. Here, just the bridge pickup. I'll roll the volume off some. Now the neck pickup. And the tone. Okay, this is going to be the bridge pickup, and I'm running through a Soulfood, which is kind of a clone, overdrive clone, going into the Marshall that you heard the tone with a little bit of breakup on it. Now this is with the overdrive kicked in. The neck pickup. Both pickups. So I've switched from the Marshall amp to the little Fender Champion 600. Now this is a good little tube bedroom practice amp. Okay, so I'm going to play it through this Fender, and you'll see that it's a little bit brighter than the Marshall. Okay, so now I'm going to add a little overdrive to it. So now I've got the Fender amp with the Soulfood overdrive going, and I can control how much overdrive is in the signal by adjusting the volume control on the guitar. Now I can also stack gain with it, so I'm going to be using a super overdrive on the back end of the Soulfood to kind of bump it up even more. And you'll hear the noise that's inherent in these pickups. But now if I turn the volume down, you don't hear it. So that's one way that you can control the volume or control the noise level. So you can see that you can get a ton of different tones out of this guitar just by kind of playing around with it. So like I said earlier, this is a pretty good value. And yes, it's a dirt cheap guitar, but Yeah, I'll probably use it when I go out and play live. If you like this video, be sure and give it a thumbs up. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and click the bell icon so you're notified when I post new content or go live. If you have any ideas for videos that you want to see, or if you have any products that you'd like to see reviewed or techniques, leave it in the comments below. And until next time, keep practicing.